Okay, this is the best update ever. Hey folks, my name is Pravus, and welcome to more Timberborn, the game where you play as sentient beavers, inheriting a ruined Earth and restore it using the power of water, lumberpunk engineering, and of course, massive dams. We've covered this game on the channel before, and one of the reasons I like it so much is it really tickles my engineering brain, right? Using the power of water and beaver ingenuity to accomplish some pretty lofty goals. And with the new Update 6, which just went live today, we have more tools at our disposal than ever before. Like, this is literally a game changer. I'm going to dive into a lot of these new features in today's video, but before we get started, I want to say a very big thank you to Mechanistry and Daredrop for sponsoring today's video and getting me the early access. If you guys like what you see, and I think you will, then you'll find a link in the description down below, and I'd encourage you to click on that. Now, let's start up a new game. We're going to play with the folk tales today. I'm still hoping we're going to get a third faction at some point in the future, but you really can't go wrong with the folk tales. And I know it's been a while since I last played this on the channel, so you might notice that the maps have changed a little bit. What is this weird stuff? Bad water. Yeah, that's not part of this update, but it's still very impactful. I'm going to try playing in the canyon. I can envision something really cool in the canyon. You'll see. And I'm going to call this settlement the Tim Tam Dam. Why? I don't know, it just sounds good. Okay, now if you've never seen Timberborn before, let me walk you through some of the very basics before we get into the new content. Like many survival city builders, we have a population we have to manage, in this case, a bunch of folksy beavers. We need to provide them with food, water, shelter, and of course, lots of resources. And unsurprisingly, given that we are beavers, that is mostly going to come in the form of wood, which we can then gather up. We can also gather up some of the local fruit, or even take a quick little dander into some farming. And then of course, when building our structures, one thing that's always been great about Timberborn is the ability to build vertically on pretty much any of your solid structures. But of course, this isn't ultimately a game just about building out a simple settlement and getting your resources together. I mean, that in and of itself is quite good, but the real draw of Timberborn has always been the water. You see, this is a ruined world that the humans destroyed before they went extinct, and the sentient beavers are now taking it over. And as you can already see, wherever the water flows, life returns to the land. Very important when you need to grow food or more trees. In fact, if we could get this water to flow in many different places, the rest of this world would come to life as well. Well, except for where the bad water is located. This stuff is toxic. Still, historically speaking, the way that this game would simply be played is you'd have some water sources where the river begins, and you'd start building out these big and complicated dam projects in order to wall off the water and have huge reservoirs that you could work with and so on, right? But this was always a very limiting process, because no matter how big you made this reservoir to contain as much water as possible, what you were effectively doing is creating this giant impassable wall. And that was because there was a limitation in how Timberborn was coded. You see, up to this point, water has been effectively 2.5D. I think that's the proper term. At any particular point in the map, you would have like an open square here, and it would have a water level value assigned with it. It could be like, I don't know, in this case, probably looks like 0.4 or something. Or it could be 6 blocks tall of water, something like that, right? So the top would get kind of rendered, and everything underneath it was just water, and that's what determines the water physics. Wherever there was water, but the level next to it was lower, that's the direction the water would start to flow. But it also meant that everything under that point was just a giant wall of water. You couldn't build anything under the water. That wouldn't work. Well, now that is no longer the case, because water is now truly three-dimensional. Let me actually just go ahead and hop into the dev console, and I will show you what I mean. Let's suppose that I don't like that this bad water is flowing out over here. I mean, sure, it's all leaving the map, so it doesn't really matter, but let's say I didn't like that it was here, and I wanted this water to flow all the way over to this exit point instead. Previously, you'd have to do something kind of like this. Build all these walls out, right, and start forcing the flow through here. But again, an impassable wall, you'd have to go over it, and that could get kind of tedious. But now, we have other options, including these nice new little things here called Overhangs, which basically are these little anchored points that you could just place like this, and they count as a solid surface anywhere you want them to be. So you can kind of break the laws of physics and start creating a whole bunch of new verticality that wasn't possible before, including these kinds of giant metal platforms. So what if I started doing something kind of like this instead, right, and placing these big platforms? And then I walled these off. Yes, for all intents and purposes, I am building an aqueduct. However, there is one small little problem. These metal plateaus here, they are not waterproof, so this is all about to leak out. There's a solution for this, though, which is called impermeable floors. If I were to place these along here, the water will not be able to escape. And now it flows like this. Of course, it's about to destroy the land, but you get the point. I mean, heck, these impermeable floors even work on some of your buildings, too. So if I wanted to, I literally could turn this entire place into one giant reservoir lake and have an underwater city, and the beavers wouldn't mind it one bit. I mean, that'd be complicated, but you totally could. I mean, considering these overhangs, as far as I'm aware, have no other height limit to them, and they really don't seem to mind the laws of physics too much at all, I'm pretty sure we could build one giant hive beaver city, and that would totally work now. Now, the only problem with this is that this is a very late game activity, right? These overhangs and stuff, they cost metal, which means we need to get a load of science from my beavers so we can unlock all of this stuff. Then we need to go and start extracting all of the ruins to get some metal. Yeah, it's kind of a big ordeal. Still, the very creative amongst you might already be able to think about what kind of cool things you could do with this. I mean, heck, if we wanted to, we could probably take something like this infinite source of bad water over here and build up this really tall aqueduct that is constantly stepping down little bit at a time with water wheels inside of it, and it becomes an infinite source of power before then being sent off to the edge of the map. And that's totally doable. I can't think of any reason why it wouldn't be. I mean, I guess those of you who haven't seen this game before may not know what I'm talking about with power. Right, of course, that's one of the big important things about this river is, the ability to generate electricity. And that means usually placing down some water wheels. And there's a whole science to this, right? Intentionally trying to dam up the river in such a way that you can maximize the water flow. The more velocity and pressure you have, the more power you get. Blah, blah, blah. Like, this game gets pretty complicated. And that's always been one of the best things about Timberborn. It's a game that really makes you think, right? Plan ahead. Be industrious. See the world for what it can be. And find a way to get there without, flooding your entire town in the process. But of course, at the end of the day, never forget this is still a survival game. And the elements are definitely trying to kill you, so you need to plan accordingly. Look at the world just dry out there. It's awful. There is hope, though. This world may be barren and look terrible, and there are many ways to cure it just by making the water flow literally everywhere, but there is now, as of this update, an actual end game goal. You see, we've always had these nice little wonders and monuments we can build in the past, right? So you can get like a farmer monument or a brazier of bonding, some good stuff. But now, there's also the Earth Recultivator, a true endgame goal that takes 20,000 science to unlock. And if you can do this, not only do you make your beavers very happy, but you launch tree seeds all across the Earth, actually bringing hope that this world can be saved. If you are hoping I'm going to build that in this video, you are sadly mistaken. That is, many hours of playtime required to get to that point. In fact, most of the really cool stuff in this update is so late game that it's going to take me forever to get to that point. So I will admit, in this video, I am going to turn on some dev commands and we're going to start experimenting. I want to try out a few different systems, really put some of the water physics and the verticality to the test, and see what this game can handle. Like, for example, something I'm really curious about. Does water pressure actually exist in this game? Right? Because we got some nice little bad water sources over here. In theory, water is just going to keep kind of piling up. It's an infinite source, except for during the drought season. But like, if I were to just place down some levees around it, right? Give the water literally nowhere else to go. Something like this. Does the water actually start building? Oh my gosh, it does. Oh my gosh, that is amazing. Hold on. You want to create some bad water aqueducts? This is how you do it. Like, we can just let this rise up like so, and there we go. The water shall flow. Amazing. What about a certain phenomenon of water called connected vessels? That is a thing. Like, let's suppose that I created a little reservoir in this area, and then we'll block this end off over here, and I'm going to go ahead and place a water source right here. So we should see some water starting to build up with nowhere to flow into this reservoir, right? And yeah, that is exactly what happens. So now we get rid of the water source. We have an empty tank and a full tank. If I then delete the blockage, is this automatically going to flow so that the water evens out between the two of them? Yes, it does. Wait, hold on. That went too far the other way. Okay, there's apparently a little bit of water momentum here, which doesn't make a lot of sense. There we go, though. It looks like it's starting to reach equilibrium. Dude, that's like actual water physics right there. That is an actual phenomenon. Connected vessels are a thing. I don't know what I will do with that information, but it's there. Very, very interesting. One other thing, by the way, these overlooking platforms that I was talking about earlier, these apparently can be placed over your crops, and the crops will continue to grow if you do this. Now, personally, I think that's a little silly in the sense that, you know, sunlight usually has to get to crops for them to actually grow, so if I were to completely cover this entire thing with giant overhangs so I could have vertical farming, that's a pretty cool trick, but I think that maybe sunlight still ought to be a factor in this. Nonetheless, though, it does mean that we can build even more vertically, and we don't have to conserve quite so much farmland as we did previously. In fact, what else can we do with overhangs? The reason I wanted to place myself in this canyon is I'm kind of thinking, even if I am just in creative mode, and I'm aware that this is not earning it at all, we could try creating a really nifty city. Well, let's start with some of the water features. I'm going to go ahead and dam off this giant water source area, although this does give me an interesting thought. So we did just create this big reservoir, right? And normally what you would do in Timberborn is you'd have some floodgates, and you'll be able to adjust, you know, at what level are you going to let the water start to escape. However, in the process of doing this and letting this thing fill up, and this would be the case during a drought as well, everything downstream has kind of dried up. There is a new feature in this game as well that maybe could make this better. That would be the sluice, a one-directional method of controlling water flow. And you can build other things on top of it. So let's quickly delete everything on top of it. I want to try placing some of these down. So water flow has to go like this. Whoop, and already immediately we can see that the water is now able to start to escape. Hold on, what does this do? Let's go ahead and temporarily close this so the water can't flow out. All right, so this should all leave, and we're going to start filling up the reservoir again. But check this out. Close above downstream depth. So if the water downstream ever gets below a certain point, it's going to reopen. Oh, and I can see the little blue plane right here to represent. So if the water flows beneath this point and set this to auto, so let's say something like this, it should turn back on automatically, right? Sure enough, it does. So this is a really good way of regulating the amount of water that comes out. So even while I am filling up this reservoir, and I might be able to use these floodgates to set off several different aqueduct channels, we can still keep the main river flowing. Oh, that's nice. And I can also see that there's this option here to close or open depending on the contamination level. Because that can happen, right? If the bad water and the regular water were to mix, it's not exactly healthy, right? It corrupts the land, it kills plants, it makes your beavers sick. Nothing good comes from that. That would be even worse in certain cases where, let's say, you had a bad water flood instead of a drought event. And then all of a sudden, all this terrible toxic water is getting down the river into your town. But see, this makes me think that there might be some alternatives. Like, let's suppose I wanted to create another source of water over here, but depending on whether it's contaminated or clean, I want to determine which of these two rivers it's going to flow into. So we'll end up having two different sluices. On this side, I will say if the water is below, like, any depth... Oh, and it actually does adjust based on the height of the sluice relative to the ground. That's kind of cool. But I want to say if the contamination on this side is below 5%, and over here, if it's above 5%, that determines when it closes. So if I've got this right, then by placing some clean water sources right here, this will fill up. Sure enough. Whoop, well, okay, I put too many in there. There we go, whoopsie. But this side opens up for clean water. But if I got rid of that and replaced it with a new bad water source, now it should flow out the other side. Look at that. That is exactly how it works. Okay. And then we'll reset things back the way they were before. That is interesting. Yeah, I can see some immediate uses for sluices. So 3D water physics, sluices to control the flow, more verticality than ever before, endgame wonders. Dude, there's a lot in this update. But I know there's a little bit more to this as well. See, I was talking earlier about trying to get a, like, almost infinite source of power, right? Using aqueducts and a lot of water wheels to create a stepping system. Like, let's actually, for the sake of argument, just try to build something kind of like that, all right? Just so I can show you what I'm thinking of. Like, we could build something that kind of steps down like this, and if I were to place water wheels inside, right? So something like this starts to happen. The water starts to flow out this little sluice, and all these wheels are a-turning, okay? And you can build things underneath this, so if I wanted to build a town underneath here, we could totally do that, but now we do have a lot of power. The question is, how do you get it down? Now, before, that actually got a little bit tedious, because you'd have to place down these kinds of little power shafts in order to kind of start stepping your power needs down the cliff face, right? But that's no longer the case. In Update 6, there is a vertical power shaft. So, like, let's suppose I tried to hook everything up kind of like this. So all of this power together gets put into this one system, and then brought down over here rather than creating this little stairway pattern we've always had to do in the past. That's way better. So we'll route this all the way over here, and then let's say I wanted to get myself a couple of lumber mills, gear workshop, a paper mill, whatever. You get the idea. This would produce me about 2,700 horsepower worth of power. Wow, okay. And this isn't even the best I can make it. Oh, we're flooding. Ah, there we go. Just had too many water sources in there. Still, wow, okay. Yeah, so with the power of aqueducts, power is potentially no longer an issue. And with vertical shafts, it's actually fairly convenient to access it. So what if I wanted to do something else that's a little bit crazy? We had talked about building something kind of underwater. This seems like a decent enough place to try this. Should we try building a small little underwater town? Like, we could do something kind of like this. Now, you might look at this and say, that doesn't look like much. It's just a bunch of platforms with stuff on top, and the water just flows underneath it, which is certainly true. But if I were to go down a few layers, what you'll see I've actually done here is created a little neighborhood with all the amenities up on top, but plenty of places for the beavers to live. We're going to find out if this actually works, though, because if I didn't make this watertight, this whole thing's about to flood in a horrible way. So let's see. The water levels are gradually rising. A little bit more, and there we go. All right, starting to flow over all the housing. I don't see any flooding warnings yet. And now it's able to flow out here. Look at that. Wow, that works. Now, it's still a little bit tricky to work with, right? Because just because I have the impermeable roofs on top, right? Oh, wow, the happiness is going way up here. Just because I have the impermeable roof tiles up on top, yeah, that means the water can't flow down into the building, and that is important. However, you still have to be a little bit wary about the water flooding in through the side of a building. If I had just this, like, little area out here exposed to the water, it would still flood through the windows. So you still have to block this off a little bit with some levees, but it does give you a little bit more room to work with. And now what I could do is turn this entire area into one giant reservoir body of water. But I'm also taking advantage of a lot of the space underneath it, which is pretty sick. Like, this even looks pretty good, I'm not gonna lie. And the beavers are having absolutely no issue getting around, too. So if I wanted to, what I might end up doing is actually turning this entire area into a surprisingly underwater urban area. The real trick, I think, is you need to be prepared to divert all the water and dry this area out first, before you start building it and flooding it. Because otherwise, it gets a little bit difficult to build, right? Which, you know, that makes perfect sense. You gotta dry an area out first. So it's probably important to actually fill this area in while it is still empty, get everything set up, and then probably save your game before you let the water out, because you'd hate to find out you had a leak somewhere, and then it's all ruined with no way to flush it on out. Now, another really cool thing that I think we could do, and I want to test this, right over here, I'm going to go ahead and detonate all of this dynamite and create a little trough. One thing that I've kind of struggled with in this game in the past, right, there are forms of farming that require that there is some water present, right? A certain amount of water, because if you don't, then the plant will either drown from too much water or it's going to dry out from too little water. So that's always been kind of a trick, and you have to like really intentionally just divert a little bit of the water out of the river in order to have just the right amount. I think we could control this now by making use of the sluice. So like, what if I place an aquatic farmhouse like right over here for aquatic crops, and then I'm going to have to demolish some of this wall to place some sluices. And then if the water is above, let's say, a very small depth of 0.2, that's when I want it to close. So what should happen is this is about to let out a small amount of water, like this. Might actually be a little bit too much to start, but we'll see. In fact, I'll just go ahead and temporarily close it so that it doesn't do too much more than this. And we've just created a nice little pool of water. Now, this normally kind of evaporates over time, which is why it has to be constantly supplied. You can't just have one big pool like this. But with the sluice set to auto, it should do that for me, right? So now let's just go ahead and place down a whole load of spatterdock. And there we go. We have perfectly fine little aquatic crops, not too much water coming in. This is sustainable. Dude, this is great. All right, I'm starting to think that maybe the sluice is the best addition here in this update. You know why? Because previously, if you wanted to have a really big reservoir for a ton of water for emergency situations like what we have right now, you had to wait for this whole thing to fill up before it got up to the levels of these floodgates, and then you could control the water flow. Now, at several different height levels of this water, even when it's mostly empty, I can still maintain some water flow through it and do whatever I want, but there's plenty of space to build up excess, and then the floodgates if it becomes too much. This is actually great. Actually, I wonder if a design like this would also work with some gravity batteries. Could that be a thing? Because if you don't remember how gravity batteries work, basically it is going to take power from a source like these water wheels, and it's going to start putting the kinetic energy into lifting up this block of stones, which transfers it into potential energy, and then when you need it, the stone starts to lower, and then the potential energy converts back into kinetic. So that's kind of how this works. I think in creative mode, it's probably just going to start fully charged, unfortunately, but if I did something like this, I'm pretty sure this totally works. And then if I ever turned off the power for some reason, so let's say I did that right now, by simply turning off the water flow, everything else will keep running, which means slowly I should see, yep, the stones are a-fallen. Whoa, the water's coming through here now. The point is that works. Interesting. One of the challenges of working with all of these overhangs and these aqueducts and stuff, though, it's definitely going to be building access. How do you get your beavers up here to work effectively? That's going to be the real trick. Oh, heck. I just realized I could even place a windmill on top of one of these vertical shafts, and this works. Huh. Okay, vertical shafts are great. I can actually use these to make windmills more of a thing now. Now windmills are actually space efficient. I don't need to keep stepping up all the power transmissions. Dude, way cool. All right, you know what? I'm feeling creative. Let's see what would happen if I wanted to go really crazy with the verticality and the overhead feature. What if I wanted my little town to stretch across this canyon like one giant bridge? Now, the structural engineer in me looks at this and says, oh my god, these beavers are all going to die. Do you even know how much load is cantilevering off of these failure points right here? This is not gonna work. I'd actually really like to put some struts or something underneath this, but I think one of the little quirks of the overhang is this spot right here has to be left open. Yeah, I can't actually fill this and connect it. So I can't even make this look structurally sound, and yet somehow it works. Still, what an idea alone with this for creating a platform. What if I literally turned this entire canyon into one giant lake, and I just built everything over top of it? I mean, it'd be one heck of a pain to transition my entire economy up above this, but like, it's theoretically possible. So what I'll do over here is I'll make sure I set up a separate district up on top, because remember this game is still divided into districts so that you can easily, well, I say easily, transfer resources back and forth between different specialized sections without overloading everything. Which means a district crossing right here, like so. Okay, so now we can separate everything logistically. And then we can just go crazy with storage and industry and housing. So let's suppose I wanted to have a quick little wind farm up on top to provide power for this entire area. Plus maybe a few little cute decorations and stuff, because, you know, the beavers don't need to be reminded that they are way higher than a beaver has any right to be. And then we can kind of just build compact in these little sections I've got here. I probably could build a little bit tighter and taller if I wanted to, but I mean, like, I've got a couple layers of houses here. I've got some stuff up top and wonders and research and entertainment. Yeah. There's a lot we could do here, and none of this affects what I can build down here on the ground. Actually, as I'm filling this out, I feel like the hardest thing for me to do is to make sure that I have the power going around. This is where it would be nice if there was a way for me to route this underneath this structure, but I don't think there's a way to do that. Not safely, anyway. But maybe if I'm a little sneakier, and instead I attach a few different buildings together. How can I find a way to get... Because the thing is, if power can get into one building, it can get into all of them that are connected directly. So if I can find a way to stack the power up, I think houses work for this. I could be wrong. But if I built like a small little house like this, could I then put something on top of it and it would stay powered? Yes, that totally works. This would in fact have power. Okay, so there are sneaky ways that we should be able to step this power down and this whole system still works. Like this. There we go. This now connects over here, and I can add the observatory to this level over here, and this works. Could easily set up a nice little cooking district over here for everything we would need, and that all gets hooked into the power this way too. And I still have a fair bit of power here. 6 windmills may not be enough. Enough for what? I don't know. Doesn't really matter. This is all just for fun. There we go. This kind of populates that whole thing. Look at this. Wow, this is actually shockingly pretty efficient. I think we've got almost everything that the people could need. A very strong industrial and research section over here, refining every single material, even the ability to start building up our own robots, cook our own food, and then lots and lots of housing and storage and other wonderful things. The only thing this is really lacking, I think, is actually going to be just some simple water production, because everything is down here on the ground, and of course farming. Now here's a thought. I mean, the beavers who live up here in this district, surely they look down upon the beavers who live below them, literally. What if I literally did just flood this entire area, right? We could bring the water to them. Time to evacuate, little beavers! Everyone get to higher ground! Because now that the drought has ended, I'm pretty sure that this dam is about to break! Boosh! Out goes all the water! Lots of water! Flood, my pretties! Flood! Oh, everyone below didn't stand a chance. Don't worry, though. It's going to result in net greenery by the end of this. All of this is going to be... Actually, wait, this is going to mix with the bad water, isn't it? This might be a terrible plan. It's fine. We can rely on good old-fashioned dams. I mean, we just broke one, but we can do it anyway. There. Nice big dam like this. The Tim Tam Dam. That's going to capture all that water. Oh my gosh, look at it go. Nice knowing you, little underwater village. Didn't last long. Sorry about that. I mean, you guys know what they say. You gotta be ready to crack a few eggs in order to build a giant dam. And now we just relieve the excess, and boom! Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've created something beautiful here. I mean, sure, we're out of power, and, you know, most of my beavers are dying from thirst, but good news! I brought the water to you, you're fine! Oh, and before I forget, there is one other really important feature you guys need to know about in this update. The one that is making my wife the most excited. And that is, of course, the ability to customize your beavers. The new detailer station over here apparently means that we're going to be able to customize our beaver tails. Now, personally, when I think of customizing a beaver tail, I'm thinking about customizing a very delicious sweet donut-y treat in Canada, but this apparently is a thing. The only problem is, in order to make this work, you need some extracts, which I think the only way to get that is out of extracting the bad water itself. Yeah, we would use a centrifuge in order to do that. So we'd have someone go pump up the bad water, put that into a centrifuge, and then once I have extract, we can start painting. And you can see the different little pictures that we could choose here. It's like a little stamp for their tails. That's cute. Alright, I think at this point I actually have finally exhausted all of the new content in this update. Does this give you guys a good idea yet as to all the new stuff you can do? It's pretty insane. We have more tools at our disposal than ever before. I mean, this was literally impossible for me without the console commands, but if you want to have a really good late game experience and you can dream up something really crazy big like the biggest dam you've ever seen here, well, it is certainly going to be a possibility now. Thank you all very much for watching today's update video, and thanks again to Mechanistry and Daredrop for sponsoring today's video. It's very much appreciated. I had a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to finding out what the community is going to come up with for this game now that they do have these new tools. If you guys would like to learn more about Timberborn, of course, there will be a link in the description down below, and I would encourage you to click on that. Otherwise, please consider hitting the like button for this video. It really does help a lot. Leave a comment, subscribe, hit that notify bell, and I will see you guys next time.